The bloodiest 7 miles in British military history, and 7 of the bloodiest miles in military history begins here outside the village of La Boisselle, where the old British front line was on the 1st of July 1916. To the north, the trenches ran all the way to the Belgian coast, and to the south to the Swiss frontier. Almost 600 kilometres of continuous trenches, barbed wire and machine gun emplacements. The British dug huge mines under the German positions, and the most famous of which is this one, the Loch Nagar crater. This mine was detonated at 7:28 a.m, 2 minutes before the men went over the top on July the 1st, 1916. Hundreds of German soldiers were killed in an instant. This mine is very conspicuous by its sheer size, but it had very little impact on the strategic position of the British, and was in fact really a waste of time and money. The story of the Irish on the Somme begins here. This is Thiepval Wood. In one day, more than 2,000 of the 36th Ulster Division were killed, and 5,500 casualties in total. The 36th Ulster Division will forever be associated with the first day of the Battle of the Somme. But in reality, they only spent 2 days here. 1 day fighting, 1 day retreating, and then they were evacuated because they were a broken force. On the morning of July the 1st, 1916, the Tyneside Irish Brigade was in reserve, but most of them never even got to their frontline positions. They were mown down by German machine guns that were supposed to have been silenced. In total, the Tyneside Irish Brigade sustained more than 2,000 dead during the First World War, almost a quarter of all those who served in the brigade. This stone bench tells us, think not that their struggles and their sacrifices was in vain. Alas, when one considers what happened here on the first day of the Battle of the Somme, it is hard to concur with that sentiment. One of the saddest stories of the first day of the Battle of the Somme occurred in these trenches. These trenches belonged to the 1st Battalion of the Newfoundland regiment. Newfoundland was a part of the British Empire in 1914. It didn't even have an army, but when war broke out, it raised our regiment. On the first day of the Battle of the Somme, approximately 800 men went over the top. 674 of them were killed or wounded by the end of the day, including 310 men who were dead. This was a calamity for a country that had, at the time, just a population of 240,000 people. Driving the road from Albert to Bapaume, it's all uphill the whole way to Poitiers, which is in the middle of the Somme battlefield. During the First World War, when the front settled down in 1914, the Germans made sure that they occupied the high ground and any villages that they could get along that way that would help them to fortify their positions as a sort of a deadly necklace that the British had to overcome in order to get to their intended destination. The village of Poitiers was about 2 miles from the British start line on the 1st of July 1916. Australians managed to capture this fortified position on the 23rd of July, and they held on to it, but at a grim cost, as the Germans shelled this place incessantly for the next 2 weeks. In late August 1916, the 16th Irish Division joined in the Battle of the Somme, and they would have advanced in this direction, in the direction of Guillemont. And when you look at the terrain here, you see how flat it is and how exposed the men were in trying to capture this village. It took 6 weeks and thousands of men.
Autre chose, c'est-à-dire que notre village a été rasé complètement. L'artillerie a balancé, a fait tomber 3 obus au mètre carré dans notre village. 16e division irlandaise était composée de 17 000 hommes à peu près, et il y a eu à peu près 3 700 morts. Les Irlandais n'ont pas simplement libéré Ginchy et Guillemont, mais bon, c'est grâce à eux quand même qu'on y vit bien à Guillemont.
This is the memorial to the 16th Irish Division here at Guillemont. This cross was unveiled on Armistice Day 1924 in College Green, and 50,000 people turned out to see it. It was finally erected here in August 1926 and stands outside the church in Guillemont ever since. There are almost 4,000 men from Irish regiments on the Thiepval Memorial. They are remembered here if scarcely anywhere else. These are men who have no known grave, whose bodies were never recovered from the battlefield. Among them was the most famous Irish casualty of the Battle of the Somme. Tom Kettle was a former nationalist MP, a poet and an academic, and he died at the Battle of Ginchy on the 9th of September 1916, and he wrote a famous poem to his daughter Betty in the weeks before he died. This poem was a riposte to those people who said that the Irishmen who died in the Battle of the Somme died for nothing, and his response was, "Know that we fools now with the foolish dead died not for flag, nor king, nor emperor, but for a dream born in a herdsman's shed and for the secret scripture of the poor." There are many sobering statistics related to the Somme, but here's one that I think is the most poignant of all. I'm standing on what is 1 square yard of ground. Each square yard of ground gained by the British during the Battle of the Somme cost 40 casualties. That's 40 men killed, wounded or missing. The Battle of the Somme affected every family, from the meanest Dublin tenement to the doors of 10 Downing Street. This is the grave of Lieutenant Raymond Asquith, the Grenadier Guards, who was killed on the 15th of September 1916, and he was the son of the British Prime Minister Herbert Asquith. At the end of the Battle of the Somme, there was 1.2 million casualties. It was the biggest battle of the First World War. And what was it all for? The British moved the front line just 7 miles. And just a few months later, the Germans simply abandoned the Somme to a more defensible position, which became known as the Hindenburg Line. Less than 2 years later, during the German Spring Offensive of 1918, the Germans took the whole of the Somme region back in just a couple of days.